As American forces returned to the Gulf, the Arab world found itself divided. In Kuwait, the dominant emotion was fear of Saddam Hussein.
We are backing 100%, the United States in their stand, and the United Nations in their stand against the regime, because he is a direct threat to us, and for our kids, and for our future.
In most of the rest of the world, there was only anger at the Americans and their allies playing favorites from afar.
والله أولاً يعني شغلة تدخل أستراليا احنا بنعتبرها شغلة ما بتعنيها، لأنه إذا بتعنيها يا ريت كانت تدخلت في القضية الفلسطينية. يعني ما إلها دخل تيجي على المنطقة وتتدخل وتصير في تحالف جديد مع أمريكا ونقصها تجرب أسلحتها في الشعب العربي.
The crisis may be over for now, but both the fear and the anger linger on. Beside the turbid waters of the Gulf rise the towers of Kuwait, a gleaming tribute to the power of Allah, oil and money. In a triangular patch of desert in the space of 2 generations, Bedouin tents and fishermen's hovels have given way to banks and malls and motorways. But 7 years ago, when the victorious coalition forces arrived in the city, they found it smoking and looted. The ruins have long since gone. Hazim al-Nouri drives his 2 boys to school along streets lined with the spanking new mansions that count for modest houses among Kuwaiti citizens.
And they call their families and they shoot them in front of their families.
The boys can hardly remember the 7-month-long Iraqi occupation. But for their father and all adult Kuwaitis, the bitterness and the fear are still very much alive.
At least for the 2 or 3 generations, they will not forget what Saddam done.
What was your attitude to Iraq before that?
It's both families, you know. Many brothers have sisters there, many sisters, and so it is a family. It's a family relationship. But Saddam and his regime, you know, destroy that relationship. To kill the man or the woman for him is something very easy. You know, maybe killing sheep is much harder than him killing a human body, you know.
In the end, of course, it was Saddam's own soldiers who were slaughtered like sheep. They fled the city up this road towards Basra, laden with plunder, but most of them never even got as far as the border. The carnage inflicted by the United States Air Force on the highway of death is one of the indelible images of the Gulf War. It seemed then that surely Saddam Hussein's days must be numbered. Traveling the same route just a few days ago, the memory of those scenes was vivid, and so was the irony of what was happening now. Well, for whatever reason, the coalition forces stopped the slaughter and Saddam Hussein survived. And that's why we can't take you any further up this road today. The Iraqi frontier is just 10 kilometers up there, but this whole border zone is now a tight security area, because 7 years after inflicting that humiliating defeat on the Iraqi army, the Americans and the British are back. On the very patch of desert where they put the Republican Guard to pell-mell retreat, the Abrams tanks were practicing fire control. On an airfield that they themselves attacked when it was in Iraqi hands, British aircraft were arriving. Their bombs punched huge holes in its reinforced concrete hangars. Now the same hangars were being used to store more bombs, and the tornadoes were arming again. But not everything was the same. The coalition that won the Gulf War included most of the Arab world. This time, only Kuwait was offering full support to the Allied military build-up. And Kuwait was responding to fear.
We are a small nation. We cannot defend ourselves. We are next to Iraq. And as you know, our borders, within hours, Iraqi troops can march inside Kuwait. We have different military agreements with different countries. So we cannot take chances again.
Some might say that you're putting yourself into even greater danger in that, after all, Saddam might still be there when all this is over and Saddam doesn't forget.
That's true. That's true. But you should look at it the other way around. What if you leave Saddam doing what he's doing by building his weaponry machine, and in the future he'll be more dangerous to Kuwait rather to the whole world.
At the central fire station, hundreds of women volunteers were taking courses in the rudiments of firefighting. The Taro firefighters might not have proved to be much use if the Scud missiles had arrived, loaded with nerve gas or anthrax spores. But when you're afraid, it's better to do something than nothing. Are you doing this because you're concerned about what might happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks?
Yes, of course. I think that Saddam Hussein, he doesn't concern about the Iraqi people, and he just don't care, just care about himself. And I think that maybe Saddam Hussein have many weapons, many effective weapons, and I think they have to stop him.
Nobody cares about things that are going on which amount to genocide of your adversary, trying to find a common ground.
As the crisis deepened, Ikrem Murad relied on her daughter Mashail to translate the stream of words that poured from the satellite TV. She wasn't interested in Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. She was desperately hoping for a single word about the plight of her beloved son Bedr and his fellow prisoners of war. Mashail's friend Ahlam also has a brother, and like Bedr, he too was arrested by the occupying Iraqis in August 1990. Altogether, more than 600 people disappeared during the occupation. Their relatives and the Kuwaiti government are convinced they're being hoarded like pawns in Saddam Hussein's jails.
You know, we don't care for the POWs, families. We don't care about chemical weapons because we have something important than this issue. We have our, you know, our kids. It's hard. We have been suffering for 7 years, more than 7 years. He's my only brother. His name is Bedr.
As events seemed to be moving remorselessly towards a military showdown, Ahlam and Mashail found themselves torn between fear and hope.
I think it's a good. It will be a good, because if there is if something happen in Iraq, it will be you know, like a war, and all this the hostages will go out.
So you think it might be the end of Saddam Hussein?
Yes, I think.
شعوري قلبي محروق ليل ونهار بشيء ولا ليل ليل ولا يوم نهار نهار أنت تدري أنا مو لازم أقول شيء.
She said her heart's burning. I couldn't live. Along the day she is thinking about him.
أنا لهالدرجة ودي أبوس صدام أنا شايف رجل.
She said if I see Saddam I will kiss his feet to release my son.
But most Kuwaitis know from experience that kissing Saddam's feet is no way to appease him. As long as he survives, they can't feel completely secure in their desert island of wealth and privilege. All this has been snatched from them once, and could be perhaps again. One evening last week, Hazim al-Nouri took me along to meet his friends and relations. The Diwania is the Bedouin equivalent of the Gentleman's Club, where polite political discourse is the order of the day. Tonight, of course, there was only one topic of discussion. What would he do?
He will retreat unless the United States or the United Nations remove him from the power. Otherwise, he will repeat this game. He likes this game. Anytime you look to him, anytime he thinks that he's been forgotten, he jump in the picture and said, "That's me. I am here. I am still there." If it's still in the regime, he will repeat this game again and again until he's finished.
It's only a hope. This is all what we have, you know, to hope to the end for Saddam Hussein regime.
Though few in Kuwait would be so callous as to admit it, a negotiated settlement will dash those hopes. Saddam will not be finished. Mrs. Murad's son Bedr will not be coming home. And Kuwait, the poor little rich kid, will go on being afraid of the bully next door. But for most of the Arab world, the bullying this time around has been done not by Saddam Hussein, but by America. Seven years ago, as the Allied bombers pounded Iraq, the streets of Amman were filled day after day with demonstrators glorifying Saddam Hussein. Alone among its neighbors, Jordan supported Iraq. People and government were united. In those days, in the teeming camps where a generation of Palestinians have festered, every shopfront carried a portrait of Saddam. Times have changed. Even here, they realize now that Saddam is no hero. But they insist that America's vendetta against him is hurting ordinary Iraqis, and that they've suffered enough.
الغارات هاي وين بدها تسقط؟ القنابل اللي بتضربها امريكا، الطيران هذا، المدفع، الجندي اللي بده يطلق ناره، وين بده يطلقوه؟ في وجه الشعب العراقي. صدام متخبي زي ما بيقولوا، ما أنه صدام، فواجهوه كشخص لشخص. أما بالنسبة للشعب العراقي نحن نرجو من جميع العالم.
الحل في التفاهم كل شيء بصير. بالتفاهم كل شيء بصير. وبالحل حرام نذبح أطفال هذول هيك يتذبحوا مشان الناس موششين.
There's another universal theme. America is applying double standards. One law for Israel, another for Iraq. The Americans and their allies insist that their quarrel with Saddam Hussein has absolutely nothing to do with the Israeli peace process. But you try telling that to the 100,000 people who live in this camp and who've been waiting 30 years to return to their homeland. You won't find a single one of them who agrees.
والله الوضع هذا أنه مهزلة بالنسبة للعرب يعني. أول يطبقوا على إسرائيل، إسرائيل مستحلة من الأردن، مستحلة من سوريا ومن لبنان ومستحلة فلسطين. يطبقوا أول على إسرائيل، بعدين يطبقوا علينا إحنا العرب.
And it's not just America that's blamed. From his shop in Baqra camp, Mohammed Abdul Kalk sells frozen Australian lamb. But he doesn't think much of Australia's political judgment.
بعدين انتم بتقولوا يعني انه عنه دكتاتور، فرضا انه او جدلا انه بدنا نوافقك على الكلام. والشعب العراقي جعان. طب الشعب الفلسطيني اللي متشرد له 50 سنة ليش يا اخوي ما هبت امريكا واستراليا وبريطانيا تساعد هالشعب بعودته الى ارضه الى وطنه؟ ولا هذا الشعب الفلسطيني ما بحق له انه يحيا زي باقي الشعوب بحرية وسلام.
You will take the hatred out of hearts and you will pass along to your children a peace for the generations.
There's a deep bitterness in Jordan over the stalemated peace process. 3 years ago, King Hussein took the same momentous step that Anwar Sadat took for Egypt years before. As President Clinton beamed benevolently down, he shook hands with Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and made formal peace with the State of Israel. But a year later, Rabin would be dead at the hand of a Jewish extremist, and the president of the world's only superpower would prove unable or unwilling to make Israel's new leadership abide by the terms of the peace.
There is a great deal of unhappiness in Jordan as elsewhere in the region, arising out of economic difficulties, arising out of the conflict with Israel and the faltering peace process, the plight of the Palestinians. So the government is probably worried that things might get out of hand.
And that's just what happened in the town of Ma'an in southern Jordan. On Thursday, in a clash between pro-Iraqi demonstrators and police, a man was killed. At his funeral on Friday, the police lost control completely. This is no Palestinian camp. Ma'an is a pure Bedouin town, the heartland of the king's traditional support. Yet here and everywhere else in Jordan, the opponents of the peace process were using the Iraq crisis to attack not just the Americans, but the king. What do you make of the events of yesterday in Ma'an?
Well, I make of it that actually things in Jordan and I think elsewhere in the Arab world are really extremely volatile and explosive. We should take this as a very strong signal that the status quo cannot continue in this region for a long time without leading to an explosion.
The news that in all probability the bombs won't fall has been greeted with triumph in Baghdad. It will bring scant comfort to the people of Kuwait. For them, too little has changed. And in Jordan, it will give King Hussein a slim chance to regroup his forces and revive a peace process that's been all but buried. But he can't do it without help. It's only a 2-hour drive from Amman to Jerusalem. But for American diplomacy, the obstacles and roadblocks will be even tougher than before. Across the River Jordan, on the Palestinian West Bank, the pro-Saddam demonstrations have been more frequent and more fervent than any in the region. It's Monday evening in Jerusalem, and Kofi Annan is already on his way to New York. For the first time in weeks, the protests have stopped. But America has got some damage to repair. It's always been difficult for it to combine two almost incompatible roles, that of loyal friend and ally of Israel on the one hand, and the independent arbiter of a delicate peace on the other. But now, thanks to Saddam, America has been painted as a belligerent enforcer, with its truncheon raised against the innocent members of an Arab nation.